Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the kickoff of the 2025-26 Forum Speaker Series Luncheon. This is your official 2-minute warning. It's going to be a little bit different opening this year. We have a great little video to show you to kick off. So you got about 2 minutes, and then we're going to get rolling. Thank you all.
Do the right thing is our first value, and it's the most core to what we are as a business and what we do. We believe in long-term relationships. Doing things the right way is the only way we can do them. We've been in the community for 115 years, so everything we do starts with that value of do the right thing. We're going to make sure we do right by the client every single time.
Excellence is found in its pursuit. It's about getting a little bit better every day, overcoming challenges, setting high standards. Excellence is a habit. It's not a finish line.
I love working with my clients and strategizing with them to help them with their employee benefit plans. But coming back to the office and working as a team with my coworkers and those account managers is integral to what I do.
If you want to go fast, go by yourself. If you want to go far, go with the team. When you think about your business and your company and looking out into the future, you want to be partnered up with companies that are going to be there for you. Companies like Hagen Hamilton.
Hagen Hamilton is proud to sponsor the Forum Speaker Series, and we thank you for joining us. Enjoy the presentation.
That is our official opening. Chris, the John family, thank you guys so much for making these luncheons possible for all of our guests, and we look forward to highlighting you each and every month. Ladies and gentlemen, join me in welcoming your Salem Chamber President, Mr. Ted Ferry.
I don't have a fancy insurance video, so sorry about that. Thank you for that. I wanted to thank each and every one of you for being a part of the Forum Series. We have a great kickoff for today. I mentioned at our board retreat some things about being a pillar in the community. And I wanted to share with you that when I look out in this room, as we're even up here having a little snack and things like that, you are the pillars in this community. The women and men in this room, people look up to you whether you like it or not. And so it is, as I talked with Dick even earlier, we need to assume that role within this community. So thank you for being a part of this. I also want to thank you for our Forum Season Series presenting sponsor, Hagen Hamilton Insurance Solutions. So thank you for doing this. I'd also like to thank Housing Now Coalition, which we'll hear from momentarily, to speak about their sponsorship. And would you please stand with me right now for a moment of prayer or reflection, which will be followed by our presentation of our national anthem performed by Ashley Cunningham with By Strength Collective. Let's pray. Gracious Father, we take up this moment to pray or reflect, each in our own unique way, on our lives and on this moment. We are so thankful for this meal that's set before us. We're thankful for those that make it possible. We're thankful for those that make this event possible. We are also so thankful for our elected officials and the many leaders in this room. Help us all to have servant hearts. We are grateful for this day, for its blessings, its opportunities, and even its challenges. Give us all wisdom, strength, guidance to take on each and every day with love and kindness for everyone. Amen. Ashley?
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were
Thank you, Ashley Cunningham. Changes. Thank you, Tom, for. Ashley is the owner of Be a Strength Collective, and if you're curious about being healthier, stronger, setting yourself aside some time to reach out to her. She is the owner of Salem's only women's semi-private health gym. So every woman deserves to feel safe and comfortable in their fitness journey. I bet you there's many of you that never thought I'd say all that. So again, thank you, Ashley, for a great job. I also like to introduce the head of the table. Down at the far end there is Chris McLaren. He is the large commercial and public entity at Hagen Hamilton Insurance. Betsy Schultz is a consultant with Pacific Northwest Strategies and organizer for the Housing Now Coalition. Michael Andersen is our keynote speaker. He is the director of cities and towns at the Sightline Institute. And then a special guest that I invited, I went to Emerging Leaders, and he had no idea that he was going to be at the head table. I didn't know I was going to be at the head table. But he was at Emerging Leaders. He's an ambassador there. So if you have young people involved in business or in your business or any young people here, make sure you reach out to him and talk with him about the exciting things that the ambassadors that they do. He is also a recently promoted to vice president. Boy, you're young for a VP. Vice President, Commercial Loan Officer at Willamette Valley Bank. So thank you very much for him being here. And the last person on the end is the wonderful Jackie Roche. She is the membership manager at the Salem Chamber. In August, I'm getting there. In August, Jackie welcomed 23 new members at the Salem Chamber. Now let's ring the bell. So 23 new members. I think, is that a new record? That's awesome. That's amazing. So thank you very much. If you have any questions about membership, she is the person to talk to. So again, thank you guys for being at the head table. I appreciate it. We also have a number of dignitaries in the attendance today. And let's see, we have Mayor Julie Hoy, Salem Ward 2 Councilor Linda Nishikia, Dr. Irvin Brown, also from Ward 5, Ward 7, Vanessa Nordyke, Serena Cross from Kaiser City Council, Shani Starr from Kaiser City Council, and then we have Maria Hos Pressy from the Chariots Board. So thank you guys for all of them being here. I'd also like to recognize if there's any past presidents of the Salem Chamber Area Conference, if you could please stand and be recognized if any of the past presidents are in the room. So thank you guys for being here. And then also any current board of directors from the Salem Chamber of Commerce, if you could please stand and be recognized. And with that, I'd like to invite Tom back up to kick off again the Spirit of Salem Award.
Well, thank you, President Ferry. Pleasure to be with all of you today. And we are bringing back something that we did for a number of years, took a brief hiatus, but we are going to return to the Spirit of Salem. I also would like to note that our wonderful city councilor, Shane Matthews, also just stepped in the room. Shane, thank you for your service, along with Councilor Nishioka Brown and Nordyke. So, the Marion Berries. When we think of prolific organizations centered on excellence in local sporting events, we immediately think of Hoopla, Salem Capitals, Volcanoes Mavericks League, Capital Football Club, the Salem Angels and Dodgers, and of course the various youth and high school teams that we all cheer on. Salemites love to cheer for sports teams. And this summer, we received our newest addition to our community, the Marion Berries Baseball Team. That's right. The Marion Berries are the community baseball team of Marion County, providing very exciting and engaging family-friendly entertainment that creates at the core great family memories. In the Berries' inaugural season, they were just the second team in league history to make the postseason. In the Berries' first ever playoff game at Chemeketa, over 2,000 fans showed up in support. The highlight of the Berries' first season was the focus on obtaining and showcasing the best collegiate players in the greater Salem area. Along with making the playoffs, the Berries received the league's Sportsmanship Award for class and character that the team demonstrated on and off the field. I think that's something we all enjoy seeing modeled. In addition, Luke Emanuel was honored with the League Executive of the Year. With the success of the first year and the commitment to stay at Chemeketa Community College, the Berries are excited to announce ballpark upgrades in seating, concessions, kid zone, and group outing opportunities. It was a very good first season, and the future looks sweet. Join me in welcoming owner and chief executive Luke Emanuel and general manager Pat Zajac to the stage.
Well, thank you. My GM, Pat, had no idea this was happening, so it was kind of fun to see his face as we did this. In regard to our entire team and organization, I want to thank the Chamber for this great award. Winning this is a recognition not just of our company, but of the staff and the people who make it happen. That's everything from our employees, our players, coaches, our mascots, Barry, Dingle. They all played a role in making this happen this first year. I know you're going to go laugh about Dingle. This was a rough year. It took a lot to get to this point. But again, credit goes to everyone that helped make it happen. A lot of credit goes to our community for believing in us this first year. The future looks bright. We're excited about where we are and where we intend to go. So thank you very much.
And a quick thank you from myself, too. My wife and I moved here to Salem just a few years ago, and when I took this job, I had no idea what the community response was going to be and all the stress and hard work that we had to go through to put on this first season. And to have the response that we did from the entire community was overwhelming to all of us involved with the organization. So again, thank you, all of you, for the support, for welcoming me and my family to Salem over the years. It's been awesome, and looking forward to building an even sweeter future. Thank you, guys.
I think it's the best logo in the league, too. So wonderful job on your marketing, and we should all be wearing those baseball hats around. We're going to transition to our monthly sponsor today. And the Salem Chamber engages in a number of fields that affect livability in Salem. And we have some upcoming efforts in childcare to help our employers and our employees who are struggling for childcare. And one of the initiatives, we have recently joined a large coalition of important groups that is incredibly diverse, and you're going to hear more about that in a moment. But I want to make you aware of the Housing Now Coalition. In response to Salem's ongoing housing crisis and the critical implementation phase of the city's housing production strategy, we have made significant progress in launching a new community advocacy initiative. This coalition effort is officially named the Housing Now Coalition. Our work is to ensure Salem adopts bold, practical solutions that increase housing availability. It's going to provide diversity in housing options and an accessible supply of units for our entire community members. We're building a broad cross-section coalition that reflects the economic, equity, and community resilience dimensions for housing access. The Salem Chamber is but one member of this diverse community-centric coalition. I am very pleased to bring my peer and somebody I have a great deal of respect for, Betsy Schultz, to the podium to tell you more about this effort, and Betsy will also be introducing today's keynote speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, Betsy Schultz.
Thank you so much, Tom. I really appreciate that. And as Tom mentioned, you all are very educated people, have been following housing issues in Salem for a long time, I'm guessing for most of you. But one thing that really stood out to me recently was the statistic that in the past decade, rents have increased by 53%, while homeownership costs have risen by a staggering 173% in Salem, which is just mind-blowing. Wages have certainly not kept pace with that, and I know that we are seeing so many of the downstream effects of folks having to spend more and more and more of their income on housing costs. So with this, though, it's a national issue, right? We have other communities besides Salem that are dealing with this, and so if there's tariffs, if there's the interest rates cost being so high, what can Salem actually do? What can we actually do? And there's actually quite a bit. We have Michael here from Sightline Institute to speak to some of the details. I know the City Council this is an issue that they care about a lot and have to deal with, but Oregon land use law is a little esoteric, and often on a Monday night when you're talking about land use law, who shows up? It's relatively white, relatively privileged, relatively housing secure individuals, and we're not hearing from the entire community. And so Housing Now is a coalition of nonprofits, community organizations, and local businesses working together to help solve Salem's housing crisis. We are focused on breaking down barriers that make it more difficult and expensive to build homes, while also pushing for new funding tools to support housing and infrastructure. We are building partnerships between public and private sectors to make homes affordable for working families and those on fixed incomes, and we're helping to educate city leaders and the community about why urgent action is needed. Together, we're committed to making Salem a place where everyone can afford a place to call home. And so I would like to introduce our partners, although I will say Tom kind of rushed us on our launch for this. We've only been active for about 3 weeks, and I am so excited that we are here today, as organized as we are. Our website is live as of about 20 minutes ago, so you can go to housingnowsalem.org, housingnowsalem.org. But the partners, a huge shout out to the Mid-Valley Association of Realtors for launching this, for getting us going, for the Chamber, obviously, for the Home Builders Association of Marion Polk Counties, Chemeketa Community College, the Latino Business Alliance, Dev Northwest, United Way of the Mid-Willamette Valley, and Thousand Friends of Oregon. And we would love to have many of you in this room also joining too. So go to housingnowsalem.org. You can sign up there and find out more information. And now I have the privilege of getting to introduce our speaker for today. Michael Andersen is Director of Cities and Towns at Sightline Institute, the Pacific Northwest Sustainability think tank. His work there since 2018 has included research, writing, and coalition building for campaigns to re-legalize fourplexes and neighborhood apartment buildings and to remove parking mandates as a barrier to jobs and homes. He also co-founded the advocacy organization Portland Neighbors Welcome, and before joining Sightline in 2018, spent 12 years falling in love with Oregon as a journalist covering housing, transportation, and the ways they shape poverty and prosperity. Also, today is his son's 9th birthday, so happy birthday to Barney. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Betsy. I'm going to be moving around a little bit. We'll see how this goes. But tell me if I have any audio problems, if it screeches at you, etc. And I'm going to test out this pointer because I love to point at things. Is there a pointer here? I'm not sure. Okay. I'll be pointing with my fingers at things. Thank you so much. Again, I'm so pleased to be here. The gentleman over here was like, Sightline Institute is not a mainstream right-wing organization. Was that the phrase? And I said, no, that's true. We try to be not left, not right, but forward when we can be. So hopefully we'll bring that spirit to a conversation about something that I think matters across all the political lines, that we all understand the need for housing, and hopefully we can come together around some of the ways that we can reduce the costs of housing and increase the benefits for everybody when housing is built, to make it easier. So one aspect of that is that the local government has a role in it. That is not the only government that has a role, and we'll be talking some about the interactions between different levels of government and different parts of society, inside and outside of government. We all need to be part of a difficult job here. Oh, I know why it's not pointing. It's not on. Is that possible? It's on? All right, okay, there we go. Okay, great. Sightline is a regional sustainability think tank. This is Cascadia, our focus area. You can describe it as anywhere the salmon can swim, running from the very top of California all the way up to Anchorage, over to Missoula and a little bit of Wyoming. The vision of Sightline is to make this area, which we all biologically depend on, the most welcoming, prosperous, and permanently prosperous, that is to say environmentally sustainable version of itself. And as part of that, I'm a housing policy researcher focusing mostly on housing, a little bit on transportation. And one thing Sightline believes is that cities are good. We think that cities are good for the economy, they are good for the society, and they're good for the environment that we all ultimately depend on. Not everybody wants to live in a city, that is totally fine. But if people do want to choose to live in a city, they cut their energy use in half without really noticing it. And if they want to, we think people should be allowed to and able to. So one way to talk about my work is zoning reform. So what is zoning reform? I think of it as re-legalizing cities. This is a city. Does anybody recognize this city? Any guesses? That is Salem. This is Salem. This is 1923 Salem. I think it's Statesman along. That's one of the street here I saw. Anyway, the one thing I love about these photos of this era is to understand that this was built without zoning rules. Nobody said you have to build this size of homes, and you can see there's some variety in the types of homes in this picture, but this is what people wanted to build, and this is what they built. And as you got closer to the center of town, buildings got a little bit taller, they got a little bit closer together because that's where the action was, and as you got to the edge of town, they were a little bit further apart because that's where the land was. So this is something that has been happening for millennia in the cities we've built together, and only in the 1920s, actually, here's an ad from 1923 out of Seattle. Only in the 1920s did we invent something as radical and unusual as zoning to try and manage it. Not everything zoning does is bad, of course. It just has a lot of consequences. This is an ad from Seattle's zoning commission pitching, would you like this condition next to your home? 8 cottages on one 60-foot lot. Certainly many people would not like that next to their homes, and that is exactly what happened. The zoning code succeeded in banning this use of land in most of our cities, starting in the richest neighborhoods and gradually moving to almost all of the cities. That's not perhaps evident from this photo, since most of these are detached structures, but if you look a little closer, this is a photo of the 1930 census, so the subsequent census here in Salem. And if you look closely, you will notice that a bunch of these lines, the person's relationship to the head of the household, is listed as roomer. Of the 45 Salem residents on this sheet, 28 were listed as roomer. Not every sheet is like that, but many of them are. So this is an example of if you didn't have much money and you needed some space, you would pay somebody to live in their place. We have people on this sheet from ages 9 to 85. And similarly, if you had a little space and needed a little bit of money, you would rent out a room in your place. And this is just part of living in a city. This is how it worked. This is how people were able to house each other at pretty low costs at the time. So even though that was not visible in these photos, and it wasn't entirely visible when it was banned by zoning a few years later, it certainly did change cities and societies. Obviously, cities are not just the buildings we live in and work in. They're what we do, and they are our living, and they are our working. So cities should be legal in lots of different ways, in my opinion. The consequences of all of the many ways that we have prevented homes from existing, prevented people from living next to each other if they want to, is that it has gotten harder and harder to build homes. There have been lots of other rules that we've added. We have made it more mandatory to do lots of worker safety things. We have come up with a zillion rules for preventing the economic or the environmental damage of new housing, and that has its own costs on the new housing, which is then passed to all of us indirectly. one way to look at what's been happening is to think about it in the sort of recent historical perspective. That tall bar there, that is the 1970s. So if we wanted to meet the governor's current housing targets, Oregon would have to build like it did in the 1970s. I sometimes hear people say, how could we possibly do it? We don't have enough workers, we don't have enough firms, we don't have enough person hours to get this done. That is not true. We just need to do it more efficiently, and we did it much more efficiently just 50 years ago. We could do it again if we put our minds to it. In fact, we could do it probably more efficiently than we did then, if we really wanted to. So that is the problem, and the fundamental solution is it needs to become more efficient to create and maintain housing. There's a lot of complications to that, but that's the problem we're dealing with here. And so what can we do within reason, without getting rid of every safety rule, because we don't want to? How can we figure out which rules we need to keep and which rules we can live without in the housing market? So that is what Homes Now and lots of other folks around the state is basically working on, is what are the trade-offs we can accept. Here are the consequences. We just heard about this from Betsy too. The typical Salem rent since 2016, as she said, many of you are familiar with this. You can see the meteor hitting in the pandemic. And just to take 1 year, 2021 here, so that's about a $200 a month increase in the typical Salem rent in that year, and renting is not without risk, of course. Landlording is not without cost. But it is important to think about the fact, I would say, that that's $2,400 a year, $200 a month in rent. Can you imagine, I sometimes like to think, if the median property owner's property taxes went up by $2,400 a year? Can you imagine the scale of freak out that would be involved with that? And can you further imagine that there were no additional services provided with that additional rent? There are many costs. There are many reasons why this had to happen and why the market drove this to happen. But that is what it feels like to the tenant, and so I think we can all understand why some of the tenants in our lives may have been freaking out when things like that happened, and may, again, should they happen again. So that's a little bit of context, and here's a broader geographical context. Here are a bunch of city peers to Salem. So as Betsy said, this is happening all over the country, all over the world, in similar ways, and I picked a few medium-sized state capitals, a few similarly sized cities, a few cities around the state so you can get a sense. Salem is the teal line here. You can see it. It's actually at the top of the pack, and I'm going to zoom in by adjusting for inflation here. So on the left side of the curve, you can see that Salem is leading the pack in rent growth since 2016, and then it sort of flattens out, if you can see that, right around the time of the pandemic. That's Bend with the huge spike, and then a little bit of decline afterward. At the bottom, that's Portland, which has had population decline over the period. I would say Salem has a better problem to have than Portland. It's a problem, but it's a better problem to have when you have growth. The things I take away from this are Salem's issues are not unique, and yet they are somewhat more acute. They could be better. We could be in a better place here in Salem. And actually, a lot of the reason that Salem is leading the pack here, or nearly at the top of the pack of increases in this period, is mostly before the pandemic. So this is not in Salem mostly a post-pandemic issue, as it is, for example, in Bend. You can see Bend really got hit by that meteor in 2020, 21. But it's more of a chronic thing. It's like Salem had a problem building enough homes, keeping up with demand, and it wasn't or hasn't yet been able to fully solve that problem. So that's what we're talking about here in Salem. What can we do to solve that problem while we work with other cities to solve this more general problem that we know is common to a lot of places? Here's another consequence. Homelessness has many, many causes, but the one thing that it is best predicted by across all metro areas when you look at the rate of homelessness is the rate of prices for market rate housing. So it is a complicated feature of modern life. There are lots of things we should be doing, but one thing we should definitely be doing is trying to make market rate housing less expensive. That is a key driver of homelessness. One reason, because that is sort of a puzzling thing, like what is exactly the mechanism for that? And one really great explanation by my friend Salim, he wrote a terrific post about the correlation between households with empty bedrooms and the homelessness rate. You may have heard the truism that you become homeless not when you run out of money, but when you run out of friends, right? And in a situation where it's very hard to find somebody with a spare bedroom, as it is in places where the market rate housing is more expensive, it is easier to fall into dangerous levels of homelessness. So, what's Oregon been doing about this? It's been doing a lot of things about this. I'm going to spend the rest of my talk talking about some of those. But for a quick review, here is a map of accessory dwelling unit legislation. The darker states have stronger accessory dwelling legalizations. The others have weaker versions. Here's a map of states who have legalized duplexes or more, in Oregon's case, fourplexes on most urban lots. Here's a map of places that have reduced or eliminated parking mandates at the state level, greatly reducing barriers to new housing. Each of these maps are actually out of date, to be honest. I made them in the spring, and it's spreading quickly. Oregon was the first in all three of these, or one of the first on the ADUs, and the first in the other two to take that state action. So we've been doing quite a bit on these things, and a bunch of states have been in the same boat, following suit, pursuing similar policies, doing what they can at the state level to try and remove some of these zoning barriers to new housing, among many others. The state has been doing a lot, and those of you in the room with the city would also say that we know that a lot more depends on how the cities will implement it, either what the state told them to do and what they are trying to do independently on their own. Here is a peek at all the things the state has been telling the cities to do in the last 8 years or so. It is a lot. I'm happy to make a case for why it makes sense for the state to be moving cities together as a pack towards this collective problem, but it is a lot, and I sympathize with the many people working on all these things in local government, trying to keep up with the steady stream of orders that the state has been sending. I'll give you time to look at it if you'd like to, but it's a lot. So, I'm going to highlight a few of them, and the rest of my talk is going to be talking about some of the ways that state order has been implemented differently by different cities, and hopefully open up a few thoughts about sort of different paths that cities can take when they are going through these and other future things. I'll start with one I mentioned already, the 2 to 4 plexes and cottage clusters, legalization of different ways to use low-density homes to build these small clusters of homes on a small lot. I think I'm from Portland, so I think it's okay for me to say these people are just insufferably Portlandy. Would you explain? Would you accept that? But I'm going to cut them a break for their little hats because they are 26 and 27 when I took this photo last year, and they just bought a home. They were standing in front of that home. It is a townhome. And here's the neighborhood it's in. It looks like Mr. Rogers' neighborhood, right? This is the 6 units on that lot under construction. You can see in the very middle of the photo, and it feels like Mr. Rogers' neighborhood too. It's a great spot. It is terrific in my mind that they are able to build a life in this place that's close to their connections and work and so on at significantly lower price than anything that had been newly built in this neighborhood before. On average, it's about 30% lower for these new homes that are being built within the Portland under the new zoning code there. And by the way, I do not mean to say, and I hope that it is not taken to say, like, Portland did a bunch of good stuff and you should be like Portland. I'm going to talk about things Portland did not do well, but bear with me for a second because it really did a great job on this particular thing, I would say. And it didn't show up for a few years. So that's the first year, that's before on the left in the orange. Then you got the first year after the new zoning, and then entrepreneurs figured out how to use it, and they, at those prices, they found a lot of buyers. So here's as a share of total permits is up to 24%, 25%, something like that, in year 2 of phase 2 of those zoning reforms compared to 2% before. I don't think that's going to continue forever. It's not a huge share of a large pie right now. It's a large share, a small pie right now. But it's an indication that this is possible. And because this is local money, bootstrapped companies, working with a pretty fine-grained information about what's needed locally. I think it's able to be more responsive to local needs than the folks who need to convince somebody from out of town to come in with millions of dollars. Here's folks working on a modular townhome in a cluster of these buildings. You can see it's a small unit, but that is exactly what a lot of people need. I hope to not need a lot of space when I am retired here in Oregon, and looks like a great place to me. The implementation of these low-density zoning reforms, though, has been really uneven. So the results, maybe it's going to take time for many cities to take off, but it hasn't taken off very many places yet. These are Beaverton, Eugene, and Portland are the standout sort of larger jurisdictions where it really has worked, and Salem, among other places, it has not really taken off yet. I could not tell you why that is. There are some differences. I'm happy to talk to anybody about some of the possible reasons that this and that is working or not. It may just be a matter of chance, and it may be a matter that we can control. But Salem is in the bucket of folks that have actually gone down a little bit in the share of total permits that are in these middle housing things. So it seems like possible that some cities, including Salem, could figure out better ways to implement this particular rule. Here's another one, single room occupancy homes. We talked about the rooming houses earlier. Maybe this is sort of the modern equivalent of that, though rooming houses are also on the list. You can see about halfway down. Those are re-legal as of 2021 in Oregon. SROs, single room occupancies. For example, this fella is a barber. He lives across the street from the Microsoft campus in Redmond. How does he do that? Because he has a very small home. He has a bed, he has a 2-burner stove, he has his private bathroom, and a microwave, and a chair and a table. And that's his place, and he loves it. The experience of the handful of cities that have legalized these micro-apartments or co-living spaces, some are calling them, have led to the states of Oregon and Washington legalizing these throughout multifamily zones. It has not been fully implemented yet, and there's wildly different ways that cities can choose to make them actually be viable or not viable. There's going to be a set of state rules coming in the next couple of years that will constrain some of that. But if you want to create housing for people at 50 to 60% AMI without subsidy at the market rate, without the paperwork, this is the way to do it. Recent state-led zoning reforms include automatic zoning adjustments. This is an interesting case. So Governor Kotek last year passed a bill that said if you want to get a break on the height limit or the design rules for that garage door or the minimum lot size for this subdivision, you can ask for a limited adjustment, and a city must grant that adjustment. If you're a developer and you can demonstrate that it's going to make your project viable or it's going to bring down the price of the home. However, the state also said, as part of the sausage making, cities can opt out. Cities can say, no, not for us. We'll submit the paperwork. We can essentially do it. Strange thing is, to my complete surprise, most cities have not. Most cities in the lighter green here on the map, if you can see it, have said, no, if somebody really needs this variance, this adjustment, yes, we will give it to you. That sounds fine. We need housing. A handful of cities, including Salem, have opted out. Portland is an interesting case. They opted out, and they did the paperwork wrong from the state's perspective, and the state was like, no, resubmit. You have to do this differently. And then the new administration there was like, no, actually, never mind. We're not going to submit. We're going to opt out. So in Portland, as in many of these other cities, you can now get this additional flexibility. This is, I think, a case where the state is sort of exercising soft power, saying the default is to give this flexibility, but there's still a way out. Maybe that's a good way to do it. Statewide model codes, this is the last I'll talk about now, but it's sort of breaking news. It's maybe a month old, and not many people know about it, but I'm pretty excited about it. The state is going to say that, let's take this apartment building. This is down the street from me. It's a 4-story building. It's not a huge place. It's less than 50 homes. It doesn't completely transform the neighborhood. It fits in pretty nicely. I love it. This building is illegal in almost every apartment zone in Oregon. Even the apartment zones will routinely say no more than, for example, 10 homes per 10,000 square foot lot. That's not really an apartment building if you only have 10 homes. In some cases, it's fewer than that. Even in what's described as a medium or high density apartment multifamily zone. Basically, we need to, in my opinion, legalize buildings like these. This is one up in Camas, Washington, just a 4-story building. It's a perfectly normal, perfectly good type of housing that fits into a downtown and builds the services and demand in its area, but it's really been almost completely banned by zoning without anybody noticing. This is an area where Salem excels. So here's a map of places where you can actually build one of those last 2 buildings that I showed as a share of the residential and commercial land. So Salem, almost at 25%, followed by Portland, Tigard, a few others, before you get to almost none in a large number of cities can you actually build that perfectly normal neighborhood size apartment building. The states, and I'm going to go back. The state zoning standards for multifamily zoning would change that. They would say if it is a multifamily zone, then it's a multifamily zone. You should be able to build an apartment building there, not a sky tower, just an apartment building. Of course, there's also the issue of where those zones go. Are they actually being zoned in places people want to live? That is an important issue, and it's going to determine whether the building actually gets built. For example, land zone for 4-story apartments in the Portland metro area today, that's where we had the data, is much likelier to be close to a freeway. So it's very politically easier to allow these larger buildings next to a freeway than it is to allow them in places people are actually willing to pay market rates to live, and then they don't get built. But hey, you have zoned some land for an apartment. So in summary, from all of this big list I presented, cities do have a lot on their plate, and I actually would say the good news coming out of this is that state mandates may at least get more orderly. So those of you who are working to implement these, those of you who are watching the government spend a lot of time working on these things, I have a bit of good news here, and that is that the state, local housing production strategies and state standards, these are the state's mandates for what cities have to do, are going to create a framework by which the state can say, in a few years, when you get to your regularly scheduled housing production strategy, that's when you have to catch up with the state's latest rules. The state's still inevitably going to be telling cities to do things, but I think this creates a pretty rational structure for doing so. I've highlighted in here the years that various cities around the state are going to hit that thing, and in orange are the ones from the area. We've got Salem, Kaiser, Dallas, Silverton, Independence. So you can see that's 2027 through 2032. There's going to be an ever-churning cycle of changes, but I think that it will be easier for us all to keep track of what's going on instead of the state throwing things at us very quickly in the future. I'll close with a bit of thought about what might be headed next in Salem. I would argue, at least, that it's time for the state to look to its own house on housing policy. The state has, as I've said, been doing a lot on this zoning stuff. There's a lot of stuff that is not in the plate of the localities, but in the plate of the state. So we've got wetland mitigation banks. It's very difficult to build even on a very low quality wetland, even if you're trying to mitigate that impact here in the Mid-Valley. The state could definitely take some action to make that easier to mitigate. The prevailing wage mandates and inclusionary zoning statute, we've got bad faith historic districts popping up in the reaction to new buildings that are built. You've got unsustainable property tax caps. You've got overzealous building codes. I might add, you've got inefficient corporate taxes that don't help either. There's a lot that the state could do, and I guess I would argue, and I am arguing to other folks looking at state policy, that it's time for the state to give the cities some space to implement all this stuff and start to look at the things on the state's books. I'd be happy to talk about it. In conclusion, I love to return to this building in Newburgh. So this is built in 2020, a few years ago, 3 stories, 19 units, 18 parking spaces. That was a big issue. But as you can see, there's places on the street to park as well. The building was built, and I met Miko at the little alcove. You can see her plastic chair there, and the first alcove towards the car. Mieko, in her youth, survived an atomic bomb, but she could not survive her daughter-in-law. She was living with her son and his wife, and many things were good about that, but not everything was good about that. She needed her own place. She needed to move out. Her son lives in McMinnville. She has a bad hip. It's hard for her to walk upstairs. She doesn't drive. So she was pretty limited for like where she could find, where she could afford. Turned out that the fellow who built that 19-unit building had been her and her mother's landlord many years ago, remembered her as a good egg, brought her in as sort of the unofficial super. He gave her a break on the rent in the first floor apartment as long as she rats out the tenants who are doing any bad stuff on the site. And she loves it. She told me the grocery store is there, the library is there, I can walk and go everywhere. If we can help people like Mieko find homes that they need, the space that they need to thrive in their lives, then I think we'll be having a successful state in the future. Thanks so much for your time, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Hello. Am I good to go, Brian? Hello? Okay, first one. Bryce, perfect. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing today. Question for you. You mentioned that we need to be building, I think like you said, as we were building in the 1970s, I believe. Is that a statement about the demand you believe there is for housing in Oregon? I guess I say that in light of what I'm seeing a lot of developers facing is, properties are getting much more difficult to sell. So is that about affordable housing needs to be developed? Is it just housing stock needs to go up? How are you guys thinking about that?
Yeah, that's a raw number. It comes from calculations that were basically made in like 2021, 22, when we were in a very different economic situation. And it's entirely possible that the population will not grow as fast as it was a few years ago for the indefinite future. International migration is almost zero or negative right now. Birth rate is very low. If that's the case forever, then we don't have as much to worry about. We don't have to take as many actions. If that's not the case, then we're going to be in trouble the next time the population does pick up again, because it will see another spike. We'll see another bunch of people freaking out, being kicked out of their homes, et cetera. And so at least the way I think about it is, let's plan against that eventuality. The worst thing that happens is we give people more things to do on their property. And let's make it possible for us to stay ahead of this problem before it rears its head again. That said, I would absolutely say, and I often find myself saying, certainly in Portland, also in many other places in the state, zoning is not currently the #1 binding constraint. Interest rates are bad. There are lots of things. We was talking about the insurance rates and the cause of that in the tenant protections earlier. There's a lot of issues that we can address, and zoning is mostly about making it possible to be resilient to many possible futures. I guess that's the way I think about it.
Michael, back here.
Hi. So one of the things that I noticed is that a lot of what you talked about was mostly about that middle housing sort of opportunity, but I didn't hear anything about urban growth boundary. I know that's controversial, or about altering permitting to allow for cheaper building.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is all. Those things are also very important. They are not my areas of expertise, but Sightline is, our position on the urban growth boundary is sometimes urban growth boundaries must expand. The less we need to expand them, the better. So my job is to try and say, what are the things we can do that make urban growth boundary less essential? It is not to say we should never expand the urban growth boundary, this is unimportant, et cetera. New housing is new housing. Sometimes we need to do it. And I think that is built into the land use system, though some people will occasionally deny that. As for permitting, I was actually on the phone this morning with my boss talking about how we need to get this contract signed with the person who's going to write a thing about Houston's permitting system. So Houston, the city that is like maybe the only example in the country of being able to gracefully grow its population and its economy without total housing catastrophe. Has some things that I wish we didn't learn from them. I don't think we should be building on every wetland in town, but I think that there are other things we should be learning from. It is very easy and very efficient to build a building in Houston. It takes like a matter of a few weeks to get all through the permitting process. The state passed a shot clock law saying you only have so many long to, approve a building. Didn't affect Houston. They were already so far below it, even though Dallas is screaming bloody murder, right? So the point of the shot clock law is not the shot clock law. The point of the shot clock law is to force Dallas to learn from Houston. We should also be learning from Houston and from anywhere that we can that is able to shorten permit timelines, because that's a win-win, and you'll hear from people across the political spectrum on that. It's a matter of will.
Over here. In the scope of Oregon housing, if you could remove any single zoning or code that's ubiquitous around the state to address purely the affordability aspect, what would you think would have the biggest impact?
The biggest impact is very difficult to generalize. The thing that I'm obsessed with right now is, as I was alluding, those neighborhood scale apartment buildings. I feel like we've completely eliminated this from our industry. I was having an interesting text with a friend who's a land use lawyer yesterday, and he was saying that I should be talking to the state home builders about this measure that would change the rules for like, it would say if you have these additional fire safety rules, you don't need a second egress up to a certain height, right? Up to 4 stories or 6 stories, if you have extra sprinklers and other safety measures. And he was saying that's actually in the interest of the small lot developers, of a single-family developer, because they have access to capital that can use that. I don't understand that. Maybe somebody in this room does. I would love to talk about it. But it seems to me that by zoning, we banned these small apartment buildings in desirable neighborhoods, which are still scattered through our pre-war neighborhoods today, right? And then the building code gradually evolved in a way that like nobody was there to show up for that building because nobody was building it because it was illegal. And then we banned it in the building code. So now, as I mentioned, Oregon is trying to re-legalize it in the zoning code, but we also need to figure out what are the building code things to do it before the entrepreneurs can figure out how can we actually make a business out of building these things in a neighborhood with local money and with like the knowledge of like where the actual desirable locations are going to be. So I'm obsessed with trying to get this sort of like small scale multifamily back into the market somehow. I hope that it can be a place that like a firm can graduate into when it moves from like building a duplex to wanting to take a step up. And I may be wrong, it may be completely a pipe dream.
I'm just curious about, and that may be a little bit remedial, but the goals for housing, what is the balance between rental housing versus affordable housing for purchase? Is there a dynamic there that you see as being beneficial, or is there a goal that's set out in the state's projections?
There are definitely goals. When you say affordable, are you referring to like price controlled, or you just mean like somebody can afford it?
Yeah, I'm just looking, I've got some people that we know, they're in their early 20s and they're just trying to buy a house.
Yep.
And it's like, oh my word, wow, It's just difficult with the base level costs. So I'm not looking at, affordable or limited prices, but just able to purchase.
Yeah, so homeownership is good, tenancy is good. They're both important. I guess the state has just passed a law that says it's setting a statewide goal for homeownership. We have a lower homeownership in Oregon than many states, and I think that's totally legitimate. I think we're still trying to figure out like what the policy actions that the state or even cities can take on that front. One thing we were talking about at the table earlier was the state just passed a law that is hopefully going to reduce some of the cost of liability insurance for a condo builder. I live in a condo. That was how we were able to afford a home. It's often been a starter home option for people, but it's been mostly eliminated from the market in Oregon, as in many other states. I am personally a little skeptical that liability insurance is actually as big of a relative barrier as some folks hope. But if so, then we've made some real progress on that in the last year, and that's great. That's what I got for you right now.
Yes. Sightline, one thing that they have been talking about is homes on wheels are actually homes. And your research has done some promotion of how do we make it a little more convenient for people living in a home on wheels to live in the town.
Yeah, absolutely. I love this subject. I should have brought it up with Corey. So people have been living in homes on wheels, sometimes called RVs. Actually, in the state law, any home on wheels is, by definition, a recreational vehicle, an RV, a vehicle. So people have been living in RVs in their sister's yard for many, many years, all over the place. It is illegal in almost every place to do so as your long-term residence, and you can get this as I struggle about whether you even call it a housing situation. It's just sort of a philosophical question, but it's absolutely a dwelling, it's absolutely a home. This is possible for somebody who's in a desperate situation to turn it around, get it into a backyard, get the utilities hooked up, get pipes laid. You can do that all in 2 weeks for less than $100,000 with a brand new one, let alone a secondhand home on wheels. So it seems to me that in the face of a pretty dire homelessness crisis, anything we can do to make it possible for somebody to create a better interim situation for themselves in that sort of setting should be legal. I've got lots of thoughts on sort of the finer points of that, the details of that, but it's legal in Portland, it's legal in Eugene, and people are using it, people are doing it, and setting up dedicated utilities for these places. 2/3, 3/4 of the time, it's somebody in their family, and I think that is a really lo-fi solution that people are already doing under the table. We could create safer situations for them by making it a legal option.
Hello. Thank you very much. Christopher Lopez, Monmouth City Council and Mid-Willamette Valley Community Action Agency. I was anticipating a little bit more discussion about the nexus of transportation and housing affordability and livability. It seems that the ability to provide for new developments off-street parking seems to be a hot button issue for communities that are considering these new developments. Do you have any thoughts on that, or how that can be, that can be addressed by communities, and/or how that can impact the price of new construction?
Yeah, I have so many thoughts, and let me ask you a question first. So, from Monmouth is not in the area that has been required by the state to remove those parking mandates. Is that correct?
Monmouth is not. We have taken an interesting take on this. We already completed our housing production strategy and are in the implementation phase. Our take was that any off-street parking that was directly abutting, or any on-street parking that was directly abutting the construction, would count toward the parking total required for that building. Mm-hmm. That was our answer. It's very new. I don't know if that's effective or not. I'd love to hear about what other communities could also do.
Yeah, great. Yeah, that is a common compromise. So the issue is, in zoning law, not everybody knows this, but since the mid-20th century, it's been mandatory to put parking spaces with every new building, essentially, almost everywhere. And that is just in the last decade that has shifted. People have been like, wait a minute, maybe the developer actually knows how many spaces that they need on their property for this, that, or the other thing. And there is, that's not always true. Certainly sometimes there are spillover effects, right? And so in the case of Monmouth, what they've done is they've said, okay, if you've got a curb space out front, then that counts toward your space on the lot. We're not going to guarantee that you always find a curb space, but if we make that the rule, then we can avoid banning as many homes, banning as many job creations, while also, putting some general correlation between the amount of space that people have to park a car and the need for that car. So, so as I say, that is a common compromise that smaller cities have been doing in a lot of cases. The other thing that I think
cities need to, so there are many cities in Oregon that have already implemented the state rules, including Salem, that say, we're just going to let the people on the private property decide what they do, and it's the city's responsibility to figure out the public property. So on the private property, if you want to build 18 parking spaces for your 19-unit building, you can do that as long as you think you can rent out those places, but it's the city's right, and in some cases responsibility, to put a parking permit system in the block if it's going to fill up, or put meters in if it's a commercial area, or just put in a time limit on the parking so that somebody has to park in a certain area if they're residential parking. So there are a lot of things that cities have sort of not had to do, I would say, about street management, street parking management, because they've been hitting, I hate to say this, but an easy button by saying, oh, it's a developer's problem. Developer's going to do that. Developer's going to pay for it. And the thing is that every time you say the developer's going to pay for it, in many cases what you get is nothing at all, which suits perfectly the needs of the people who want to keep parking in the street for free and hassle-free. But it doesn't suit the needs of people for actually having homes in places where, you could squeeze a few more cars on the curbside if you needed to. And eventually letting cities gracefully evolve into places where they can ride the shuttle to Independence and, do their shopping that way. That's what I've got to say in general.
In a similar vein, I was wondering what role, if any, transit plays in reducing costs, both for building and for tenants.
It absolutely does. So I just talked about the benefits. I didn't mention the tens of thousands of dollars that a parking space adds to the building, but if we want to reduce the cost of the building, we need to make sure that we're not requiring people to build more parking spaces at tens of thousands of dollars a piece than they actually need to. What, though, can we do to make it so people don't need to build that space? People need to have good options other than a car to get around. That does not mean we should wait until a city somehow magically acquires, Chicago-level public transportation before we allow any city to fill in. As I said at the beginning of the talk, Salem was built before we planned that sort of stuff out, and as a result, we have a city that is one of the best cities in the state for public transportation. The transit and development should go hand in hand, complement each other. The transit shouldn't be seen as a perfect substitute for the car. It should be seen as an option that enriches the potential for everybody to do everything. Car owners ride transit all the time, and the transit is an important part of helping a city function for car owners as well as non-car owners. It's obviously cheaper than car ownership for a lot of people, and I hope that the state finds a way to fund it.
Hello, I am a Chicago native. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
But as a native, I want to, a native of Chicago, but a key stakeholder here in Salem, building 180 units, affordable housing. I want to know, as a researcher, what research and outcomes have you found in the city of Salem with regards to housing? We provide shelter services as well as affordable permanent housing. So you've talked about a lot of other states. Can you bring it home to us a little bit closer?
Yeah, sure, I can do my best. Can you give me a little bit more of a narrow assignment? Because I know the stuff I put in my slideshow. Yeah. I know a few other things, but tell me some more things you'd like to know about.
I'd like to know, how could you help us, if you will, better serve the communities? It's a lot of people in the room, a lot of genius in the room. How could you give us some direct assignments that would help us in being able to be the mainstream instead of Seattle?
Right. Okay. It's a tough assignment. I think that my understanding on the zoning side, because that's where my expertise is, like I said. So I cannot speak to all the many parts of putting together homes that you know about all across the stack of financing and all that so on. But on the zoning side, I think that we really, in Oregon, need to be thinking about, are we legalizing homes in places people actually want to live, right? And that is good from a market perspective, it's good from a justice perspective, it is good from a health perspective. People are pretty good at figuring out what the places that they would like to live are, and those tend to be places that most people would agree are the best places to live. It's not the same for everybody. Everybody needs to choose the more or less area of town that is best for them, right? That is part of my goal. But in order for them to do that, the state needs to, or the city rather, needs to be saying, well, we have this much land for apartments and this much land for detached homes and so on. But do they line up to the places where people actually want to live? And we should be allowing apartments and detached homes in there and letting people choose what's right for them. That's what I would say.
Hi, just a quick question on specific measures or tools that City Council might be able to initiate as a problem-solving initiative. So we have a MUTIP program, multiple housing tax incentive program, and we also have an urban renewal program in certain areas of our city to help. In some cases, we've also had SDC waivers. Obviously, housing is a cost issue and a yield issue, but what specific measures have you seen city councils take on an activist type approach to help incentivize housing production?
Yeah, I am based in Portland, so I'm the most familiar with what Portland has done. And they have thrown the book that's the wrong metaphor. They've thrown a lot into the goal of trying to remove or to create fiscal incentives. The thing I would say that Portland is not ever great at is figuring out which rules to take away, right? The thing I mentioned about like figuring out which of these rules can we live without, but they're making progress in that too, remarkably. So if I can see it happening in Portland, I feel like it's got to happen everywhere, right? Anything is possible. The fiscal things that Portland has done, it recently suspended system development charges. That's the fee in Portland. It's in the low 20s of thousand, or low 20,000s per unit. That's charged to build infrastructure for those homes. Obviously, that is easier to do in a city like Portland where it's all going to be infill than it is in a city that's working with greenfield development and really needs to throw sidewalks and pipes and everything out that way. But that is part of the beauty of infill, is that you've already got a sidewalk, you've already got a pipe in most cases. So that's one big thing. The city has totally revamped what had been a failing inclusionary zoning program to require below-market homes in new buildings, and now they still require the homes, but now they're giving a tax break that offsets the cost of that lost rent. I think if you're going to have an inclusionary zoning program, that is the way it should work, and it's actually going to produce more homes. You have now developers opting into the program instead of trying to bend over backwards to get out of it, which is a win-win. I hear about other cities trying other things. Everybody wants to throw tax abatement at the program one way or another. Not everybody. Everybody outside of government wants to throw tax abatement at every new building. Everybody inside of government is desperately clinging to any ounces of revenue that they have any control over, and yet aware of the fact that the property tax base needs to keep growing if we're going to keep up with the constraints of Measure 5 and 50. So that is a difficult balance. It's sort of like a spend money to make money situation for the government in all of these cases. And I hope that we can figure out ways to align the fiscal incentives so that governments don't end up being penny wise and pound foolish by, throwing too many cost barriers into new development, seeing development dry up, seeing their property tax revenue dry up. In the long run, the more housing we have, the more we can redevelop properties that are constrained by 5 and 50, the more revenue governments will have to spend on the things that we need to do, which are plenty.
Thank you. First of all, you are a great teacher. I've learned a lot about housing in this time together, and I appreciate it. I am curious, if you were the mayor of Salem, what's the first thing you would do to increase housing production?
Thank you for your service. And thanks for the nice word. So with or without legislative action? One of each. All right. Keep adding to the list. Okay. With legislative action, I would say that the state's model code, I think, is excellent. Zoning is free. Almost everything costs money. Zoning costs a little bit of money to implement to get through the land use process, but compared to almost everything you can do, zoning is free. The more flexible you can make the zoning, it's actually revenue positive, as I was just saying, in the longer run, and the more you can open the doors to people to, maybe in year 3, be a little creative about what they can do on their properties. The state's model code is excellent. And they've got this new multifamily, they've got a middle family, and they've got a single family and an ADU model code. All of those are set up to be very flexible and very adaptable to lots of different economic conditions, like we were saying earlier. I would say cities should be standardizing to those as soon as is reasonably possible. That if I were the zoning czar, that's what I'd be saying we should be steering towards. That's not always going to be possible, and the model code isn't mandatory in every respect, right? There are parts of it that cities should continue to choose from, and they should choose where in their cities the best locations for things are. But in terms of is this multifamily zone actually a multifamily zone? Like I said, Salem is actually doing better than most cities, but I'm sure that there are things that it could find that could remove some of the accidental barriers that are in some of those zoning codes. For executive action, I wish I better understood and could tell you something specific to do on permit processing times, but it baffles me that like I said, all across the political spectrum, I see very left-wing people, very right-wing people in elected office all saying, it takes too freaking long to get permission to build something on your property. What can we do about that, right? So like I said, I wish I knew what the prescription is. My dark suspicion is that the reason it's so fast in Houston is because they just don't have very many rules. And when the checklist is very short, there aren't a lot of non-linear effects of this thing triggering this thing and this thing and this thing. And so it gets a lot simpler, and so you can do things faster. So again, I think it's possible that comes to some extent back down to the zoning and the engineering requirements and so on to just say, we're not going to micromanage it as much because that's going to have these secondary knock-on effects that everything is going to get faster.
Yeah, so Michael, I think most of us in this room would recognize that we need additional growth, residential growth. But unfortunately, I would say the general public doesn't see it that way. There's a lot of opposition towards growth, especially when it takes place close to where somebody lives. And I think that opposition, frankly, has kept cities and communities from taking the actions you've talked about here to enable it. And frankly, I think that's why we've seen the state step in recent years and kind of force these changes on cities who have been in a position of being very difficult to do those changes themselves. How do our communities, how do our cities, how do our elected officials carve through that public opposition and take these steps so that the state doesn't have to come in and force it upon them?
Betsy? No, we need organizing. We need communications. We need people to see the stories of the 20-year-old or 26-year-old couple that is able to buy a house, the 85-year-old woman who's able to find a place within driving distance of her son. I hope to share those little tidbits so that you can see the ones in your own lives and spread the news about those, because we all have to be putting people at the center of our stories. I mentioned my boss, Anna. She's done 15 years of research on how do you convince people that housing matters and that their political opinions actually are relevant to whether or not anybody has housing. And again, she comes back to the fact that people need to see themselves in the picture. They need to see that, oh yeah, I have a home right now, but I may want a different home someday. My kids may want a different home someday. My employer may need to hire somebody someday. All of those ways that we all depend on each other are often easy to forget about. It feels like, the fish in water doesn't see the water, but it's there. We need to make that water that we swim in of the housing market visible by telling the stories of individuals to each other and talking about this stuff in terms of our values. I think that a huge amount of my work in the last 15 years has been trying to figure out how to talk about microeconomics without talking about microeconomics, right? How do you say that supply reduces prices without saying in such abstract terms? It does, at least hold down prices, and it's an essential part, though not the entire ingredient. It's an essential ingredient, not the entire recipe for what we need to do, is to have enough homes. In order to do that, I think we need to be talking again about sort of the first order effects of housing, of like this ADU is necessary, or it helps the world because I have a friend in my backyard, or my kid, my own son, his best friend lives 3 houses down on our little sidewalk cottage cluster, and they would not have a relationship that is a blessing to me every single day because if they weren't allowed to share a sidewalk, right, without sharing a home. So, yeah, that's the best I can offer. I think we are getting better at it. I think that folks like Betsy and her allies are figuring out how to unite people from different perspectives. That is very important. I've noticed that elected officials love it when people usually agree on something, and there's a lot of power in that. I saw Van Jones once. He said he teamed up with Newt Gingrich, right? And they are on opposite sides, but that gave them strength. And he was able to make a bunch of progress on his issues because of that. So I respected that very much, and I hope we can do that here in Oregon. Thanks a lot.
Thank you again, Michael Andersen, for your great presentation today. We really appreciate it. Things I took out of that were cities are good and speed is really, really critical. So on the bad news for all of you, I have, Tom gave me I was running ahead of schedule. Now I have a whole page of important information to read to you. So I'll get through this as quick as possible, but thank you again for your time today. We appreciate it. I want to also thank Ashley Cunningham with Be Strength Collective for presenting today's national anthem. We wish to recognize our partners at Allied Video Productions, Capital Community Media, and Salem Convention Center. Every time you guys just showcase your talents and creating a great atmosphere for us and being able to hold this event. A few other really important things to thank as well as to remember. Our chamber ambassadors that you see wearing the Navy logo chamber jackets. Thank you so much for the hospitality that you create in such a welcome environment. The Housing Now Coalition, thank you very much for your presentation and great introduction into this and being the one of the sponsors. Thank you also, Jason John and Chris McLaren and the entire Hagen Hamilton group for being our series speaker. One of the really cool things coming up, it's important that as I do my role as I want to go to emerging leaders, I won't be able to go to this event, Chamber of Businesswomen, but I really encourage all of you to attend this. It's coming up September 16th on Tuesday. It's a lunch at the Ross West Salem, and the keynote speaker is a friend of mine, Lucy Escobar, and she's going to be talking about balance for success. So I really encourage all of you to attend to that. We wish to recognize new leadership cohort, Leadership Salem cohort, which kicks off 40 participants. Having my son go through this, as well as I have a team member that has been through this, and my daughter is in the youth leadership program. Very important program done by the McLaren Foundation, but also Willamette University. Thank you so much for Willamette University MBA program for serving as that sponsor. Our forum speaker series next month, October 20th, so mark your calendar for this. We are honored to have Oregon former governor, John Kitzhaber. He will be speaking and addressing the growing crisis facing Oregon hospitals in our state healthcare system. So don't want to miss Dr. Kitzhaber's presentation. On behalf of the board of directors, we really wish to encourage you. You know, we talked a little bit about transit. You brought up transit, and I think there's a question from the audience on it. Chariots is putting on and hosting a series of community discussions about the proposed employer-paid payroll tax intended to place a substantial wage tax on the Salem and Kaiser businesses. There are flyers on your tables. Please, we encourage you, go to this, become educated. I'm for public transportation, but we need to educate ourselves on the cost of what that will do to our community. We need to build businesses, but also build our community and more employees and help out employers. So make sure you educate yourself on that by attending one of those events. We close today, and I know you guys have all been waiting for this. for a gift from Ross Fresh Markets, our lovely bouquet over there. The winner is Alice Hunt with Edward Jones. So if you could come forward at the end and gather your lovely bouquet, we'd appreciate it. So, with that, we will see you October 20th and look forward to seeing you all. Take care.